Washington, D.C. was drowning in winter. The streets along Pennsylvania Avenue were buried in snow, the air so sharp it felt like knives against the skin. But for 15-year-old Ethan Carter, no weather could compare to the cold that gripped his heart that night. He stood outside the sliding doors of the emergency room, his hand clenched tight in his mother's trembling grasp. Red and blue lights from an ambulance flickered against the glass walls. Nurses rushed past, their shoes squeaking on the tile floors. Then the doctor came out. His white coat was splattered with the chaos of the night, his face grave. "I'm sorry," he said, voice low. "We did everything we could." The words dropped like stones into Ethan's chest. His father, Richard Carter, the man who had built Carter Enterprises from nothing, was gone. Not from illness, not from an accident, but from the crushing stress of a corporate war he had been losing. The news outlets had been merciless. Headlines blared, "Tran Global crushes Carter Enterprises in takeover." They called Henry Tran a visionary. They called Richard Carter reckless. What no headline mentioned was the heart attack that followed the humiliation. The nights Ethan heard his father shouting into the phone. The weeks when the house filled with silence so heavy it suffocated. That night, Ethan memorized the sight of his father's still body, the sterile smell of the hospital, and the way his mother broke down beside him. Something inside him hardened, freezing over. Henry Tran hadn't just beaten his father in business. He had destroyed him, and Ethan swore that one day he would make the man pay. 15 years later, the boy in the waiting room had become a man forged in fire. At 30, Ethan Carter Jr. was one of the most feared names in Washington business. As CEO of Carter Holdings, he had resurrected the empire people once declared dead. His rivals called him ruthless. His employees called him the Ice King. The press called him a comeback story, a prodigy who turned ashes into steel. But Ethan knew the truth. Everything he'd built was fueled by a single-purpose revenge. On the 35th floor of Carter Holdings headquarters, Ethan stood before floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the capital city. The monuments glowed in the distance, the Potomac winding like a black ribbon beneath the lights. But for Ethan, Washington wasn't beautiful. It was a battlefield. He turned back to his desk. A new file lay open on the screen. Tran Global joint venture proposal with Aurora Media. His jaw tightened. Tran Global. After all these years, the name still tasted like poison. Scrolling down, one detail stopped him cold. Attached to the proposal was a profile photo of the project manager, Anna Tran. His lips curled into something between a smile and a snarl. Henry Tran's daughter. The image showed a young woman with warm brown eyes and a gentle smile, her long dark hair spilling over her shoulders. She looked nothing like the man he remembered standing smug in front of cameras while Carter Enterprises crumbled. But that didn't matter. She carried his blood. Ethan leaned back in his chair, fingertips steepled. The plan formed with ruthless clarity. He would get close to her, earn her trust, maybe even her heart. And then, when Henry least expected it, Ethan would shatter her, the same way his own father had been shattered. Let Henry Tran watch his daughter fall into the arms of his enemy. Let him taste the helplessness Richard Carter had tasted 15 years ago. Revenge. Ethan whispered into the silence of his office, his voice as cold as the city skyline. It starts now. Outside, snow kept falling over Washington. But inside Ethan's chest, something far more dangerous had begun to stir not just hatred, but a fate that would pull him into a love he had never planned for. Aurora Media's headquarters in downtown Washington was buzzing with energy that morning. The glass sandsteel building reflected the winter sunlight like a blade, its lobby alive with the sound of footsteps and the hum of conversation. Ethan Carter walked in as if he owned the place. His tailored charcoal suit fit like armor, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. Heads turned as he passed. Whispers followed in his wake. Everyone in the capital knew him, the ruthless CEO who had rebuilt Carter Holdings from ashes. But today, he wasn't here for headlines. He was here for her. The elevator doors opened to the 15th floor, where Aurora's joint venture team had gathered for a kickoff meeting. Assistants hustled to set up laptops. Executives skimmed briefing packets. And at the center of it all stood Anna Tran. She wore a simple navy dress with a slim belt at the waist, her long dark hair falling in loose waves. She greeted each team member with a warm smile, asking questions, remembering names. There was no arrogance in her demeanor, just a quiet confidence that commanded respect without demanding it. Ethan watched from the doorway for a beat longer than necessary. So this is Henry Tran's daughter. He had expected a spoiled heiress, entitled and cold. Instead, he saw someone disarmingly human. That only made his plan more dangerous. Mr. Carter, a project manager, greeted, breaking the moment. "Thank you for joining us." Ethan stepped forward, his expression smooth as ice. "Of course. Carter Holdings is committed to this partnership." Anna turned at the sound of his voice. Their eyes met. For a heartbeat, the room fell away. "Anna Tran," she said, extending her hand. "I'll be managing this project for Aurora." "Ethan Carter," he replied, clasping her hand. Her skin was warm, her grip steady. He held it a fraction of a second too long, watching the flicker of curiosity in her eyes before letting go. "Shall we get started?" she asked brightly, gesturing toward the conference table. The meeting began with introductions and a review of goals. Anna spoke with clarity, outlining timelines and responsibilities, her voice calm but firm. Ethan said little, preferring to watch. Every time she leaned forward to emphasize a point, every time her brows furrowed in concentration. He studied her like a puzzle he intended to solve. At one point, an older executive interrupted her mid-sentence. "Miss Tran, perhaps it's best if the financial analysis is left to Mr. Carter's team. These numbers are well beyond the scope of your experience." The room went still. Anna's smile didn't falter, but her eyes hardened. "With respect, I prepared that analysis myself, and Carter Holdings' finance director has already reviewed and approved it." She turned to Ethan. "Isn't that right?" All eyes shifted to him. Ethan leaned back in his chair, savoring the moment. He could humiliate her now, undermine her confidence. It would be so easy, but instead, he said evenly, "That's correct. Miss Tran's projections are accurate." Anna's gaze flicked to his, surprised. He offered nothing more, but the corner of her lips curved ever so slightly in thanks. The meeting ended 2 hours later, as people gathered their things. Anna approached him. "You didn't have to back me up in there," she said quietly. "I didn't do it for you," he replied coolly. "I did it for accuracy." Her eyes searched his, as if trying to read the man behind the icy exterior. Then she smiled. "Well, accuracy is always appreciated." She turned to leave, and Ethan watched her go. Something stirred in his chest, flicker of something he hadn't planned for. Careful, he warned himself. She's not a woman. She's a weapon. And you're the one holding the blade. But deep down, he couldn't shake the thought that the blade might cut both ways. The following week, Aurora Media buzzed with preparations for the joint project's official launch party. It was the kind of DC event that blended business with politics, half networking, half spectacle. For Ethan Carter, it was the perfect stage. He stood in front of his mirror at the penthouse, adjusting his cufflinks. The man staring back at him looked every bit the role he had crafted: tailored black suit, tie sharp as a blade, expression unreadable. Yet beneath the polished surface, his thoughts spun around one name: Anna Tran. She wasn't just Henry Tran's daughter. She was the key. If Ethan could draw her in, make her trust him, he'd have the perfect leverage against the man who had destroyed his family. But there was a problem he hadn't expected. The more he watched her, the harder it was to see her as merely a tool. He shut down the thought with practiced discipline. This is business. Revenge doesn't care about innocence. The launch party was held at the Willard, one of the city's most historic hotels. Chandeliers glittered above the grand ballroom. Waiters in white jackets carried trays of champagne, and a string quartet played softly in the corner. Senators mingled with executives, their conversations a mix of policy, profit, and gossip. Anna arrived just past 7. Ethan spotted her instantly. She wore an emerald green dress that caught the light with every step, her hair swept back in a simple twist. There was no ostentation, just elegance that drew the eye naturally. Colleagues swarmed her, congratulating her on the project, and she greeted each with warmth. Ethan waited until the crowd thinned before making his move. "Miss Tran," he said smoothly. Stepping into her line of sight, she turned, surprised, then smiled. "Mr. Carter, you clean up well. I hear that's required in this city," he replied. Offering her a glass of champagne from a passing tray, she accepted. "So, do you actually enjoy these events? Or are you like me, counting the minutes until it's polite to leave?" Ethan tilted his head, intrigued. "You don't strike me as someone who dislikes attention." Her laugh was soft, genuine. "Attention is fine. Pretension is exhausting." For a moment, he almost smiled. Almost later in the evening, an older executive from another firm cornered Anna near the bar. Ethan noticed immediately the man leaned too close, his words laced with condescension. "Impressive for someone so young," the executive said, his hand brushing too near her arm. "Of course, your family name must open doors." Anna's smile faltered, but she held her ground. "I prefer to open doors with work, not my last name." The man chuckled dismissively. "Sure, but let's be honest, without your father's influence, you wouldn't be here." Ethan moved before he could think. One moment he was across the room, the next he was at Anna's side. "Funny," Ethan said, voice cool as steel. "When Carter Holdings reviewed Aurora's proposal, it was Anna's numbers, her strategy, and her presentation that convinced us. Not her last name." The executive's smirk slipped. He mumbled an excuse and disappeared into the crowd. Anna blinked at Ethan, surprised. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes," he said simply, his gaze steady on hers. "I did." For a heartbeat, the noise of the party faded. There was only the two of them, standing too close. Champagne glasses forgotten. Later, when the event wound down, Ethan found Anna on the hotel balcony overlooking Pennsylvania Avenue. The city lights stretched out before them, headlights streaming like veins of fire through the cold night. "You're not like I expected," she said quietly. Sipping the last of her champagne, Ethan leaned against the railing. "And how did you expect me?" Colder, she admitted. Untouchable. The stories people tell about you. She shrugged. I guess I thought you'd be impossible to talk to. And now, her eyes met his. You're complicated. The word cut deeper than it should have. Ethan forced himself to smirk. Careful, Miss Tran. Complicated isn't always a compliment. She smiled faintly. Sometimes it is. On the drive home, Ethan stared out at the Washington skyline, his reflection in the window overlaid with monuments glowing in the night. This wasn't how the plan was supposed to feel. He had told himself that pulling Anna close would be simple, that her trust would be just another chip in his game of vengeance. But tonight, when she looked at him on that balcony, he hadn't seen Henry Tran's daughter. He'd seen Anna, and that realization was dangerous. Aurora Media's offices hummed with the familiar rhythm of ambition. Phones rang, keyboards clacked, and the air smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink. For most employees, it was just another Tuesday. For Ethan Carter, who rarely set foot anywhere without commanding the room, it was another battlefield to conquer. But this time, the battle wasn't on spreadsheets or contracts. It was inside him. He had told himself the launch party was nothing just strategy. Defending Anna from that executive's condescension had been a calculated move, nothing more. But her eyes, the way they had softened when she called him complicated, haunted him in a way he hadn't planned for, and that was dangerous. The morning meeting began promptly at 9. Anna stood at the front of the conference room, presenting updates with the confidence of someone who knew her material inside out, and with Carter Holdings covering the infrastructure costs. Aurora can redirect its budget to outreach, she explained, clicking to the next slide. Most of the executives nodded. But one, a senior manager named Carl Benson, leaned back in his chair, smirking. Impressive, Carl drawled, though perhaps a little idealistic. Miss Tran, you're young. Sometimes it takes years to understand the difference between theory and reality. A few chuckles rippled through the room. Anna's posture stiffened, though her voice remained calm. These projections are based on market data from the last 3 quarters. I believe they're grounded in reality. Carl shrugged. Belief doesn't always translate into results. Ethan's hand tightened around his pen. He knew this typeman who saw kindness as weakness, who mistook youth for incompetence. Men who had once circled his father like vultures. Anna's gaze flicked briefly to him. She didn't ask for help. She didn't need rescuing. But Ethan felt the crack inside his armor widening. He set his pen down. Carl, he said, voice even but cutting through the room like a blade. Miss Tran's analysis mirrors our own internal forecasts. If you're suggesting Carter Holdings is also idealistic, then perhaps you should prepare an alternative model before making such claims. The room went quiet. Carl shifted uncomfortably. Of course, Mr. Carter, that wasn't my intention. Good, Ethan said flatly. Then let's move on. Anna finished her presentation without further interruption. After the meeting, as the others filed out, Anna lingered by the conference table, gathering her papers. Ethan rose, slipping his jacket back on. You didn't have to step in, she said, without looking up. Yes, I did, he replied. Finally, she lifted her eyes. If you keep defending me like that, people are going to think I can't stand on my own. Maybe they should think twice before. Underestimating you, he countered. Her lips curved faintly. That almost sounded like a compliment. Don't get used to it, Ethan said, though the corners of his own mouth threatened to soften. Later that week, he found her in the break room, struggling with the ancient coffee machine. Steam hissed, buttons blinked, and Anna sighed in exasperation. You'd think a media company could afford a decent espresso. Machine, she muttered. Ethan leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. Do you talk to all appliances like that? She jumped slightly, then laughed. Only the ones that mock me. Without a word, Ethan stepped forward, pressed 2 buttons in sequence, and the machine sputtered obediently to life. Anna blinked. You know how to work this thing, he smirked. I know how to work a lot of things people assume I don't. Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary. Then she shook her head, smiling. Thank you, Mr. Complicated. Something in his chest shifted at the nickname, dangerous. That evening, Ethan returned to his penthouse, city lights glittering outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. He poured a glass of bourbon, but it didn't burn away the unease in his chest. Anna wasn't like Henry Tran. She wasn't ruthless or cold. She wasn't the enemy he'd built up in his mind for 15 years. She was kind, smart, unshaken in the face of condescension. And worst of all, she made him feel something he had sworn he no longer had room for. Careful, he told himself again, staring into the amber liquid. You're not here to fall. You're here to break her heart. To break Henry. But the cracks in his armor were widening, and he wasn't sure how much longer he could pretend they weren't there. The winter chill hadn't loosened its grip on Washington, but inside the Kennedy Center, the gala burned with warmth and light. Chandeliers sparkled over a sea of gowns and tuxedos, the air humming with the power of senators, CEOs, and lobbyists all pretending to be civilized for one evening. Aurora Media had secured a major sponsorship slot, and Anna Tran was tasked with representing the project. For her, it was another night of networking and speeches. For Ethan Carter, it was another chance to watch his plan unfold. From across the room, he saw her before she saw him. Anna wore a simple black evening dress, elegant without trying too hard, her hair swept to one side. She laughed softly at something a colleague said, and Ethan found himself staring longer than intended. He reminded himself why he was. Here, focus. She's Henry Tran's daughter. She's the weapon. Nothing more, but when their eyes met across the crowded room, that resolve wavered. Mr. Carter Anna greeted him as he approached, her smile professional but genuine. I didn't realize you'd be here tonight. I get invited to too many of these things, Ethan said smoothly, handing her a glass of champagne. Figured I'd at least make one useful. She laughed, the sound lighter than the music swelling round them. Well, consider me flattered. Before Ethan could respond, a voice cut in. Well, if it isn't Anna Tran. Both turned to see Douglas Pierce, a senior partner at a rival firm. His reputation was notorious sharp in business, sleazy in everything else. Pierce, Ethan greeted flatly. Douglas ignored him, eyes fixed on Anna. It's been a while. You're all grown up now. Last time I saw you, you were barely out of college. Guess Daddy decided it was time to put you to work. Anna stiffened. I'm here representing Aurora, not my father. Douglas smirked, leaning closer. Sure. But let's not kid ourselves. You wouldn't even have a seat at the table if not for his name. The old humiliation flickered in her eyes. But before she could respond, Ethan stepped forward, his presence suddenly towering. Careful. Pierce, Ethan said, voice calm but laced with steel. You're mistaking sexism for wit, and neither plays well in this room. A hush fell over the nearby guests. Douglas flushed, stammering, I was just leaving, Ethan finished for him, his grey eyes unblinking. Douglas muttered something under his breath and slunk away, leaving behind a charged silence. Anna exhaled slowly. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, Ethan replied. His tone was firm, but inside he was unsettled. He'd meant to shield her as part of the performance, but the anger that surged when he saw Douglas belittle her had been real. To real. Later that night, they stepped out onto the Kennedy Center terrace. The Potomac shimmered in the distance, the air sharp with the smell of winter. You really didn't have to defend me back there, Anna said again, hugging her arms against the chill. I can handle men like Douglas. I don't doubt that, Ethan said, slipping off his coat and draping it over her shoulders before she could protest. But you shouldn't have to. Her eyes lifted to his, searching. You're not what I expected. He smirked faintly. We've established that already. No, she insisted, stepping closer. I mean it. You have this reputation, ruthless, untouchable. But the man I've seen these last few weeks, you're not cold, Ethan. You care more than you admit. Her words struck too deep, peeling back the layers he'd spent years building. He wanted to deny it, to remind her of the image he'd cultivated, but the sincerity in her eyes made lying impossible. Don't read too much into it, he said hoarsely. Complicated men make complicated choices. She smiled softly, and complicated men sometimes surprise themselves. The silence between them stretched, thick with tension. The city lights flickered in her eyes, and for the first time, Ethan's carefully drawn lines blurred. He told himself to step back, to remember his plan, but instead, he found himself leaning in just enough to feel her breath in the cold night air. Anna's lips parted slightly, her heart racing. But just before the space between them vanished, she pulled back, shaking her head. This is dangerous, she whispered. Ethan's jaw clenched. You're not wrong. They stood there, hearts pounding, the unspoken words heavier than the night air. When Ethan returned to his penthouse later, the city sprawled beneath him like a chessboard. He poured a drink but didn't touch it, pacing instead. This wasn't supposed to happen. She wasn't supposed to matter. Yet when he'd seen Douglas humiliate her, it wasn't strategy that drove him to step in, it was instinct. And when she looked at him on that terrace, when she said he cared more than he admitted, she wasn't wrong. For the first time in 15 years, Ethan Carter feared not his enemies, but himself. Because the man who swore he would use Anna Tran to destroy her father was beginning to realize the truth. He didn't want to hurt her. He wanted to protect her, and that terrified him more than revenge ever had. The storm outside Washington raged long into the night, sheets of rain battering the glass walls of Ethan Carter's penthouse. He sat alone in his study, the room dim except for the glow of his laptop. Whiskey sat untouched beside him, its amber light flickering like an accusation. On the screen was a name he hadn't seen in years, Douglas Pierce. Hours earlier at the gala, Pierce had humiliated Anand. Ethan had shut him down. But when Ethan ordered his people to dig into Pierce's background, the results were more than the usual dirt on a corrupt executive. Pierce had once been an associate at Tran Global. 15 years ago, he had played a key role in the hostile takeover that crushed Carter Enterprises. His name appeared in confidential memos, meeting minutes, even leaked emails. And buried in one email, Ethan found a phrase that made his blood run cold. Henry Tran will take the heat. Our hands stay clean. Ethan stared at the words until the letters blurred. Could it be? Could Henry Trant, the man Ethan had hated for half his life, not have been the true architect of his father's downfall? The possibility rattled him more than he wanted to admit, because if Henry wasn't the villain, then who was? The next morning, Anna entered Aurora Media with a storm of her own brewing inside her chest. She had hardly slept since the gala. Ethan's defense of her, the way he'd looked at her on the terrace, it wasn't the behavior of a man indifferent to her. But why? Ethan Carter wasn't known for kindness. His reputation was a fortress of ice. Yet in the span of weeks, he had defended her twice, listened to her ideas, even offered a rare half-smile or two, and she couldn't ignore the way her heart reacted when he leaned in that night. The air charged between them. Still, something gnawed at her. Why her? Anna wasn't naive. She knew her family name carried both privilege and shadow. For years, whispers followed her rumors of the ruthless deal her father had made to expand Tran Global, the blood it had left in its wake. She had spent her career proving she was more than Henry Tron's daughter, and now here was Ethan Carter, a man her father openly despised, suddenly standing at her side. It didn't add up later that day. Ethan visited Aurora's offices under the pretense of reviewing budgets. But when he stepped off the elevator, he found Anna already in the conference room, papers spread before her. She looked up, surprise flashing across her face. "Mr. Carter," she said cautiously. "Here for another rescue." "Here for the numbers," he replied smoothly, though his chest tightened at the way her eyes lingered on him. As they worked side by side, Anna studied him carefully. He was precise, controlled, his attention raised. Yet every so often, she caught a flicker of something else's shadow in his expression, a hesitation in his voice. Finally, she set down her pen. "Why do you care?" Ethan looked up. "About what?" "About me," she said, her tone steady, though her pulse raced. "Men like you don't do anything without a reason. So why step in? Why defend me? Why?" She trailed off, cheeks warming. "Why look at me the way you do?" The question landed like a blow. Ethan had rehearsed countless lies for this moment, but now, with Anna's eyes searching his, the words stuck in his throat. "Because you're supposed to be my weapon, not the woman I can't stop thinking about." Instead, he said carefully, "Maybe I don't like watching talented people being underestimated." Anna tilted her head, not convinced. "Maybe, or maybe you're playing some game I don't understand." Their eyes locked, tension crackling. For a moment, Ethan feared she saw straight through him. That night, Ethan returned to his penthouse, the city lights cold and distant. He opened the file on Douglas Pierce again, reading the damning line until it seared into his memory. "Henry Tran will take the heat. Our hands stay clean." If Pierce and his allies had framed Henry, then Ethan's entire mission, his vengeance, his hatred, was built on a lie. But if Henry was innocent, then Anna was innocent too, and Ethan Carter was a fool. Meanwhile, Anna sat in her apartment overlooking DuPont Circle, laptop closed, her thoughts a tangled knot. She replayed every interaction with Ethan, every defense, every lingering glance. She wanted to trust him. She wanted to believe that beneath his cold exterior was a man capable of something more. But a voice inside whispered caution. Men like Ethan don't change without reason. Men like him don't protect without motive. She wrapped her arms around herself, staring out at the city. Somewhere in the shadows of Washington's glass towers, secrets were shifting, and she couldn't shake the fear that Ethan Carter was keeping one that could break her heart. The following week, Washington seemed to hum with a nervous energy. Aurora, Media, and Carter Holdings were deep in negotiations. But beneath the polished conference calls and press releases, a different storm was brewing. Anna Tran had been unable to shake the unease gnawing at her. Ethan Carter's presence lingered everywhere, his voice defending her in meetings, his grey eyes watching her with an intensity that felt like both a shield and a cage. She told herself she was overthinking, but doubt refused to quiet. So she did what she had always done when answers were scarce. She started digging. It began innocently in old news archive. A few articles about Carter Enterprises' collapse 15 years ago. She remembered her father's tension during that time, the long nights he'd spent at the office, the brief flashes of triumph when Tran Global rose. But then Anna found something that froze her blood. Photographed it was, of Richard Carter, Ethan's father, leaving a courthouse. His face was drawn, exhausted, while reporters shouted questions about the failed deal with Tran Global. Behind him, half obscured in the frame, stood a teenage boy, dark hair, stormy eyes, a jaw clenched with fury. Anna leaned closer to the screen. There was no mistaking him. Ethan, her chest tightened. She remembered the look in his eyes at the gala, the way he had stared at her as though she were more than herself, though she were her father's daughter, nothing more, nothing less. The pieces clicked into place with terrifying clarity. Ethan Carter had lost his father in the same war that had elevated hers. And now, here he was, suddenly at her side, defending her, drawing closer, always closer. The realization made her stomach churn. Had he been using her all along? That evening, Anna stormed into Carter Holdings headquarters. The receptionist barely managed a greeting before Anna pushed past, heels striking the marble floor like gunfire. She rode the elevator to the top floor, fury boiling with every passing second, when the doors slid open. Ethan was there, standing by his office window, city lights casting him in silver and shadow. "Anna," he said, startled. "What are you, you knew?" she cut in, her voice sharp as glass. Ethan froze. "Knew what?" "Don't play dumb with me." She tossed the printed photograph onto his desk. "You were there. You lived through it. Carter Enterprises collapsed because of Tran Global and because of my father." His jaw tightened. The truth he had buried clawed its way to the surface. "Yes," he admitted, his voice low. "I knew," her breath caught, but anger steadied her. "So that's it. You approached me, defended me, to get revenge on my father, to use me as some kind of pawn in your sick game." "Anna, no." Her voice cracked. "Tell me the truth, Ethan. From the beginning, was I just leverage to hurt him?" The silence stretched, suffocating. Finally, Ethan spoke, his tone heavy. "At first, yes." Anna staggered back, as if struck. His voice roughened. "I wanted Henry Tran to suffer. I wanted him to feel helpless, the way my father did. And you," he swallowed. "You were the perfect way to do it." Her chest tightened with betrayal, hot tears stinging her eyes. "God, I was such a fool. I thought," her voice broke. "I thought you actually cared." "I do," Ethan said quickly, stepping forward, desperation in his eyes. "That's what you don't understand. Somewhere along the way, it stopped being about revenge. It became about you." Anna shook her head, tears spilling now. "You don't get to say that. You don't get to use me, manipulate me, and then claim it was love. It wasn't supposed to happen," he shouted, the cracks in his armor finally splitting wide. I swore I would never feel again, never risk again. But you, damn it, anew, made me forget the plan. You made me want something more. She laughed bitterly through her tears. You want me to believe that? After everything? I'll prove it, he said hoarsely. Whatever it takes, just don't walk away. But Anna was already moving toward the door, her shoulders trembling. You wanted to break my father, she whispered. Congratulations, Ethan. You broke me instead. And then she was gone, leaving him alone in the cavernous office, the city glittering coldly beyond the glass. Hours later, Ethan still stood there, unmoving, staring out at Washington. The bourbon on his desk remained untouched. The only sound was the hollow echo of her words. You broke me instead. He had built his life on control, on vengeance, on keeping his heart encased in ice. But in one night, Anna had torn it all apart. And for the first time in 15 years, Ethan Carter felt powerless. Anna Tran avoided Ethan Carter for 2 weeks. In Washington, 2 weeks could mean the birth and death of a scandal, the rise and fall of a bill, the shifting of entire power structures. For Anna, it felt like 2 lifetimes. She buried herself in work at Aurora Media, taking every meeting, answering every email, anything to keep her mind busy. But no matter how many tasks she ticked off, one truth gnawed at her. She missed him. She hated that she missed him. Ethan's confession had torn her apart. Yes, he'd admitted he'd used her in the beginning, but hadn't she felt something real in his eyes on that terrace? In his voice when he defended her? Could all of that have been a lie? Her heart said no. Her head screamed yes. And so she stayed away. Ethan, meanwhile, was unraveling. The man who once ruled Washington boardrooms with unshakable control now found himself staring at the phone like a schoolboy too afraid to dial. He drafted message after message to Anna, each one colder than the last, because warmth felt like a betrayal of the armor he no longer had. But he never sent them. Instead, he turned his fury on Douglas Pierce. Pierce had slithered back into the headlines, quietly lobbying for a defense contract, buying influence where he could. Ethan had his investigators dig deeper. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became. Pierce wasn't just complicit in Carter Enterprises' collapse. He had orchestrated it, ensuring Henry Tran took the fall while he and his partners walked away clean. And now, Pierce wanted Anna out of the picture. Ethan's sources confirmed it a bribe to a security guard, a car seen idling near Aurora Media, a series of threatening messages that had been brushed off as spam. The message was clear. Anna was in danger. It happened on a Thursday night. Anna stayed late at the Aurora offices, polishing slides for a Friday presentation. The building was nearly empty. The only sound, the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional passing car. Outside, she shut her laptop at 10:15 p.m., rubbed her tired eyes, and headed for the parking garage. The echo of her heels on concrete was loud in the cavernous space. Too loud. That was when she noticed the figure leaning against her car. Miss Tran, Douglas Pierce said smoothly, stepping out of the shadows. Anna froze. What are you doing here? Just thought we should have a little chat, he said, his smile oily. You've been making quite a name for yourself. But this joint venture, it's dangerous for the wrong people. I don't owe you an explanation, she said sharply, trying to sidestep him. Pierce blocked her path. You should be careful who you trust. Men like Ethan Carter, they don't change. They use people, chew them up, spit them out. Ask me how I know. Her blood ran cold. Pierce leaned closer. If you're smart, you'll walk away. Because if you don't, bad things happen in this town. And I'd hate for someone like you to end up a casualty. Before she could respond, a voice thundered across the garage. Step away from her. Both turned. Ethan strode out of the shadows, his grey eyes blazing, his presence radiating fury. Pierce's smirk faltered. Carter. You've already destroyed one Carter, Ethan said, his voice like steel. You won't touch her. Anna's heart pounded as Ethan moved between her and Pierce, his body a wall of protection. Pierce sneered. Protective, are we? Cute, but let's not forget, two wanted revenge, too. You're no better than me. Ethan's jaw clenched. The difference is, I stopped before I lost the only thing that matters. Pierce laughed, but it rang hollow. We'll see. Then he disappeared into the shadows, leaving behind the echo of his threat. For a long moment, the garage was silent except for Anna's shaky breaths. Ethan turned, his face softening. Are you hurt? She shook her head, but her voice trembled. Why were you here? Because I knew he'd come for you, Ethan admitted, his tone raw. And I couldn't risk it. Anna stared at him, searching his eyes. Why, Ethan? Why do you keep saving me if I was just a pawn? His walls shattered. Because you're not a pawn anymore, he said hoarsely. Because somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing Henry Strand's daughter and started seeing you. The woman who won't let anyone underestimate her. The woman who makes me laugh when I forgot how. The woman who scares the hell out of me because she's the first person I've ever wanted to protect, not use. Tears blurred Anna's vision. But you lied. You let me fall for something built on hatred. I know, his voice cracked. And I'll regret it every day of my life. But if I have to spend the rest of my life proving that what I feel now is real, then I will. Just don't walk away tonight. Not when I almost lost you. Anna's chest rose and fell, her heart a storm of pain and longing. She wanted to run, to shield herself from more heartbreak. But the way Ethan looked at her, unguarded, desperate, made her pause. I don't know if I can trust you, she whispered. Then let me earn it, he said. One day at a time. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken words. Then, slowly, Anna nodded, and for the first time, Ethan let out a breath that wasn't laced with anger, but with something far more dangerous. Hope. The city hadn't slept since the confrontation in the garage. At least, Ethan Carter hadn't. Every nerve in his body buzzed with adrenaline. Every shadow felt like a threat. Douglas Pierce's warning wasn't just empty bravado. Ethan knew men like him didn't speak unless they meant to act. For days, Ethan doubled Anna's security. Discreet guards followed her from home to work. Cars were checked before she got in. Cameras monitored every corner of Aurora's headquarters. She protested at first, but Ethan's eye-stormy, unyielding silenced her. Still, paranoia clung to him. He'd already lost his father to men like Pierce. He would not lose her. It happened on a rainy Thursday evening. Anna left Aurora Media after a long board meeting. Her driver pulled the car around as usual, but before she could slide inside, another vehicle screeched up beside her. Black van, tinted windows. Two men jumped out. Miss Tran, come with us, one barked, flashing what looked like a badge. It's about your father, urgent. Anna froze. My father? He's in New York. Before she could react, the second man grabbed her arm. Panic surged. She tried to pull back, but his grip tightened. Suddenly, another car swerved in, tires screeching. The door flung open, and Ethan leaped out, rain plastering his hair to his forehead, eyes burning with fury. Let her go. The men hesitated only a second before shoving Anna into the van. One raised a gun, but Ethan was already moving. The next minutes blurred into chaos. Ethan fought with the precision of a man who had everything to lose. He slammed one man against the van, ripped the weapon from his hand, and swung hard enough to send him crumpling. The other lunged, and Ethan took the blow to his ribs, but didn't falter. He threw him down, fury making him stronger than fear. Anna, run. He shouted, but she didn't. She grabbed the door handle, fighting against the man trying to drag her inside. Rain poured down, soaking them both. Ethan yanked her free just as sirens wailed in the distance. The attackers fled, tires screeching into the night. For a moment, Ethan held Anna against him, her breath ragged, her heart hammering against his chest. He pulled her closer, as if making sure she was real. "You're safe," he whispered, though his own voice trembled. "I've got you," back at his penthouse. Ethan paced like a caged animal while Anna sat wrapped in a blanket. Still shaken. "You could have been taken," Ethan said, his voice breaking with an emotion he couldn't control. "If I'd been a minute later," he slammed a fist against the wall. "I can't let this happen again." "I won't." Anna's eyes filled with tears. "Ethan," he turned, desperate. "Don't you see? This is why I tried to keep you away. This city, this war, it destroys everything it touches. First my father, now you," his voice cracked. "I can't lose you, Anna. I can't." Her chest tightened. "You're not going to lose me." He shook his head, pacing again. "Pierce won't stop. And he's not the only one. The people behind him, they've built their lives on tearing families apart, just like they did mine. If they think you're my weakness, I'm not your weakness," she interrupted fiercely. "I'm your choice." Ethan froze. Anna stood, the blanket slipping from her shoulders, her eyes blazing with a strength he hadn't seen before. "You can't keep pushing me away because of your father, or because of Pierce, or because you're afraid. I'm here, Ethan, and I'm not walking away." His heart slammed in his chest. She was right. All these years, he'd built walls to protect himself from pain, from loss, from vulnerability. But those walls hadn't saved his father. They hadn't brought him peace. And now, with Anna standing before him, trembling but unyielding, he realized they hadn't protected him at all. They'd only kept him alone. Ethan crossed the room in 2 strides, cupping her face in his hands. His voice was raw. "You were never supposed to matter, but you do, more than anything. And if it costs me everything, my company, my reputation, my damn life, I'll protect you." Tears spilled down Anna's cheeks. "Then stop trying to protect me by shutting me out. Let me stand with you." The words broke him. He kissed her fierce, desperate, as if anchoring himself to the only thing that felt real. And for the first time in 15 years, Ethan Carter let go of the vengeance that had driven him. All that mattered now was her. But Pierce wasn't finished. 2 days later, Ethan's head of security delivered a file. Inside were bank records, offshore accounts, and a chilling note. "If you want her safe, step down. Walk away from Carter Holdings or Anna pays the price." Ethan stared at the words, his stomach a knot of rage and dread. The decision he had avoided all his life now loomed in front of him. Revenge or love? Power or Anna? For the first time, The choice was clear. The morning sun crept over Washington, streaking the Potomac with silver. But inside Carter Holdings, Ethan Carter's office was shadowed, his mind torn between two impossible choices. On his desk lay the file. Pierce had sent the ultimatum that threatened to end everything. Step down, walk away, or Anna pays the price. Ethan had spent years building Carter Holdings from the ashes of his father's fall. Every sleepless night, every ruthless deal, every guarded smile had been for this empire. To let it go now would mean admitting defeat. But when he closed his eyes, he didn't see Carter Holdings. He saw Anna, her eyes full of fire when she said, "I'm not your weakness. I'm your choice." And he knew what he had to do. That afternoon, Ethan called a press conference. Cameras lined the room. Journalists whispered as he took the stage. His voice carried steady, though his heart thundered, effective immediately. "I will step down as CEO of Carter Holdings," Ethan announced. Gasps rippled through the crowd. This company will continue under leadership capable of carrying its vision forward. For me, it's time to close one chapter and begin another. Reporters shouted questions, but Ethan ignored them. This wasn't for them. This was for her. Hours later, in a secluded parking garage downtown, Ethan confronted Douglas Pierce. "You win," Ethan said, tossing a thick envelope onto the hood of Pierce's car. Inside was proof of his resignation. The press clippings already circulating online. Pierce smirked, smug satisfaction plastered across his face. "Smart move, Carter. You saved the girl." But Ethan's eyes were ice. "I didn't just save her. I exposed you." Pierce's smile faltered. "What?" Ethan stepped closer. "Did you think I'd go quietly? That file you sent Mitt's already in the hands of federal investigators. Every offshore account, every shell company, every dirty deal. By the time you walk out of here, your empire will be crumbling." Pierce's face drained of color. "You bastard," Ethan leaned in, voice low. "The difference between us is simple. You destroy for power. I destroyed my own power to protect her." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Pierce cursed, climbing into his car, but squad cars swarmed the entrance before he could leave. Agents surrounded him, guns drawn. Ethan watched silently as Douglas Pierce was dragged away in handcuffs, shouting threats that no longer mattered. Later that evening, Ethan stood outside Anna's apartment. For the first time in his life, he felt nervous, not because of enemies or headlines, but because of her answer. When she opened the door, her eyes widened. "Ethan, what happened?" "I stepped down," he said simply. "Pierce is finished. The FBI has him in custody. It's over." She stared at him, shock rippling across her face. "You gave up everything." "No," Ethan corrected gently. "I gave up vengeance. I gave up a company I built on hate. But everything that matters, that's right here." He reached for her hand, voice breaking. "That's you." Anna's throat tightened. "I don't know if I can just forget, Ethan. You lied to me. You used me, I know," he admitted, his grey eyes raw. "And I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I love you. Not your father's daughter, not a pawn, just you. If you let me." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then Anna stepped forward, tears in her eyes, and pressed her forehead against his. "You're a stubborn, complicated man, Ethan Carter," she whispered. "But you're mine." He exhaled, relief flooding him, and kissed her soft, certain. The beginning of something new. Weeks later, Washington moved on. Headlines shifted to new scandals. Carter Holdings appointed a new CEO. And Douglas Pierce's trial became the talk of K Street. But for Ethan and Anna, life settled into something quieter, something real. On Sunday mornings, they walked along the tidal basin, cherry blossoms starting to bloom. In the evenings, Anna cooked while Ethan awkward, unpracticed chopped vegetables badly, making her laugh until her sides hurt. He still carried scars, shadows of the past that would never vanish. She still wrestled with trust, with the echoes of betrayal. But they faced those cracks together, hand in hand. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the monuments, Ethan turned to her, voice softer than she'd ever heard. "You know," he said, "I used to think revenge was my father's legacy, that if I let go, I'd lose him. And now?" She asked. "Now I know his legacy isn't hate," Ethan said. "It's love. He loved fiercely. And so do I. You're the proof of that." Anna smiled, tears shimmering in her eyes. "Then let's make our own legacy." And as they stood on the banks of the Potomac, city lights flickering like promises around them, Ethan Carter finally let go of the ghosts that had haunted him. The boy who swore vengeance had become a man who chose love, and with Anna Tran by his side, he knew this was only the beginning. Spring had settled over Washington, soft and fragrant. The cherry blossoms had come and gone, but the city still buzzed with tourists, joggers circling the National Mall, and families crowding the monuments. For once, the capital didn't feel like a battlefield to Ethan Carter. It felt like home. 3 months had passed since Douglas Pierce's arrest. His empire had unraveled quickly under federal scrutiny, his name now synonymous with corruption and deceit. Carter Holdings had stabilized under new leadership. The press calling, Ethan's resignation shocking and unprecedented. But he hadn't looked back. Not once, because now his mornings began with Anna Tran. That evening, the two of them attended a charity gala at the Smithsonian, one of Anna's projects, aimed at supporting young women in business and technology. She stood on stage in a deep blue dress, her voice clear and warm as she spoke about opportunity, resilience, and change. Ethan watched from the audience, pride swelling in his chest. She wasn't just Henry Tran's daughter anymore. She was her own force, building something better from the ashes of the past. When she stepped off stage, he was waiting at the edge of the crowd. "You were incredible," he said simply, handing her a glass of water. Anna smiled, her eyes soft. "You stayed quiet the whole time." "Not like you." "Maybe I'm learning," Ethan replied with a rare, teasing glint in his eyes. She laughed and slipped her hand into his. Around them, flashes of cameras went off. Reporters scribbled notes, but for once, Ethan didn't care. Let them see. Let them write whatever they wanted. He wasn't the Ice King anymore. Later, after the gala, they walked hand in hand along the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. The city stretched before them, monuments glowing against the night sky. Anna leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Regret what?" "Leaving Carter Holdings. Giving it all up." He was quiet for a long moment. "No," he said finally. "For 15 years, I thought my father's legacy was power, and I tried to rebuild it with vengeance. But standing here with you, I know now his legacy was love. He loved fiercely, and that's what I want to carry forward. With you." Anna's eyes shimmered in the glow of the reflecting pool. "Then maybe that's our story, not revenge, not betrayal, but love that refuses to break. Ethan kissed her then, slow and certain, with the monuments of Washington bearing silent witness. For the first time since he was 15 years old, Ethan Carter felt free, not from enemies, not from fear, but from the prison of his own hatred. And with Anna's hand in his, he knew this was only the beginning of a very different legacy.